Have you ever watched someone who seemed coldly indifferent, only to realize with a shock how deeply they're wounded? For those with an avoidant attachment style, grief doesn't break out in tears, it's a silent torment within. They push away the warmest hearts to protect themselves, only to pay the heaviest price when that person leaves. The 5 worst feelings no words can fully capture. First is emptiness, not loud or theatrical, but creeping in like a knife that cuts flesh quietly. You'll hear them insist, "I'm fine," but it's that silence that becomes the prison for longing, regret, and self-blame. Next comes late regret, replaying 100, "if only I had," moments in their mind, realizing too late that they hastily dismissed gentle embraces and comforting words. Then arrives shame, the shame of realizing they were so careless, turning love into a burden they had to escape. There's no outcry, just a heart that aches painfully at every memory of lost hugs. They also confront the fear of being unlovable, when the thought, "will anyone ever truly understand me?" shadows each breath, causing self-doubt deeper than ever before. And finally, there is the anger turned inward, aimed at no one but themselves, a smoldering fire, consuming self-worth, breeding self-reproach and self-hatred. Each of these feelings is more than pain. It's a mirror reflecting the silent walls they built around their hearts. Let's dive deeper to understand why those who master emotional isolation must fight like hell just to reclaim their own hearts. 1. Invisible void, empty as a sound trace. At first, that emptiness crept in as a vague gap in their breathing. They kept whispering to themselves, "I'm fine," and tried to fill their mornings with old routines, lifting the phone, about to send a tender message, then setting it down with a forced smile and the self-reassurance, "It's okay, I'm fine." They convinced themselves that silence was a sedative, that loneliness was ultimate power. As long as they stayed absent, no one could touch their wounds or force them to face their fears. But loneliness isn't like a raging storm. It's like a fog rolling in, seeping into every corner of the soul, turning clarity into a blur. They suddenly felt their heartbeat quicken at memories of once constant companionship. The phones ring in hopeful expectation, the morning, "good morning," that awoke their day, the laughter shared in conversation, the gentle hand on their shoulder in emotional storms. Now it was all silent and compressed, a weight on their chest so heavy they could no longer hear their own heartbeat, only the impression of an invisible concrete slab pressing down. That void showed itself most sharply at dawn. Instead of the promise of morning light, they encountered an empty space where that person once was. The pillow beside them held no trace of warmth, and the water glass retained only a few droplets, like unanswered questions. They asked themselves, "Why didn't I cherish it?" But self-questioning didn't heal, it ignited an even deeper emptiness. That feeling spread quickly, following the broken trail of their disrupted routines. No more lunchtime check-in texts, no one carving out a moment in a busy day to listen. Incoming calls became ghosts they waited, then felt disappointment. Life became a play missing its lead, a performance lacking its colorful sparkle. The emptiness didn't end with morning, it shadowed their entire day. They hurled themselves into work with hollow motivation, telling themselves, "staying busy keeps sadness at bay." But the more they tried, the more the void widened like a black hole swallowing their energy. Every meeting with colleagues, every casual greeting felt tasteless. Emails and project messages offered no comfort. The city's constant din lost its rhythm. Car horns no longer sounded like life, but the siren of an ever-widening emptiness. They began to spot voids in every interaction, strangers' blank stares, friends' polite smiles, even their own reflections' laughter lacked warmth. Their mind reeled over the image of that person slipping away, drowning out every other figure in a sea of darkness. By late afternoon, as streetlights flickered on, they faced a fresh shock. Through the window, life bustled on. People walked hand in hand, yet they stood alone in a corner, an invisible gap at their side. They told themselves, just one message or a simple, "How are you?" will ease this loneliness. Yet their fingers stalled over the keyboard. On some nights, they typed a quick line only to delete it, typed again and deleted again. The screen dimmed, mirroring the emptiness in their eyes. That void wasn't simply the absence of someone. It was the awareness that the world carried on without them. Feeling rendered invisible, their heart tightened with every pulse, each beat echoing endless loneliness. At bedtime, There was no warm embrace to ward off the chill. A breeze slipping through the window sent shivers down their spine, amplified by the emptiness. They longed to see a familiar silhouette, but all that remained was their own shadow stretched across the wall in pale lamplight. They waited for a good night text, but only the ticking clock answered, its monotonous rhythm stretching time. Sometimes they reached for the phone to call, then paused, reached again, then paused, caught between the urge to reach out and the fear of rejection. Daytime emptiness gave way to nighttime anxiety, robbing them of sleep. In those freeze-frame moments of anguish, they grasped that emptiness was not only heavy like a stone, but bottomless like an abyss, a void that reanimated half-healed wounds. They remembered the days that person took time to listen, heard that reassuring voice, felt that warm gaze that made them feel seen. They recalled endless conversations sharing both fears and joys. Now those memories pricked like knives, reminding them of the cost of rejecting such genuine connection. Days later, the void invaded their dreams, waking in the night, running down dark hallways calling their name with no answer. Sight of themselves poised to send an apology text only to realize that person stood too far away. Each dream served as a warning. This emptiness was not mere absence, but a rupture between cherished memories and a cold present. Finally, they understood that healing required facing the emptiness head-on, acknowledging their loss, confronting loneliness, and accepting that this silence beckoned them towards self-discovery. The void that once marked a wound became the starting point for growth, where they would learn to honor the value of connection, build solace within their own breath, and turn emptiness into fertile ground for new hope. 2. Late regret. When those early days passed in the darkness of silence, they became haunted by a series of images replaying in their mind like an unskippable film. Every moment they had declined a warm hug, sidestepped a heartfelt conversation, now felt like a razor's edge cutting into their chest. They replayed each time they said, "I'm fine." When someone knocked on their door, every hesitation before answering, "Are you okay?" Every cautious step backward as the other reached out to their hidden emotions. "If only I hadn't been so afraid of being hurt," they murmured inwardly, each sigh burning with regret. They remembered the sorrow in those polite smiles they wore, the way hands hovered before offering comfort, the patient tone they'd once done nothing to deserve only to shoo it all away out of a false sense of safety. Now, as each day ticked by, they throbbed with pain, realizing that their own defenses had buried the only chance for understanding and unconditional love. With every replay, their heart felt nailed in place, each beat echoing, "If I had said, 'I need you' just once? If I had stepped closer instead of pulling away?" The refrain of "if only" echoed relentlessly, refusing them a moment's peace. Sometimes they wept silently in the night, hoping tears would shatter the pain, but they'd clamp down on their grief with a forced, hollow smile. They used an empty gaze to mask tears of remorse, but couldn't hide the weight of each regret-laden breath that escaped whenever memory struck. By day, they drowned themselves in busyness, rationalizing, "Keeping busy keeps me from sorrow." Yet the busier they were, the wider the void grew, an ever-expanding chasm swallowing every ounce of their energy. Meetings with colleagues felt soulless. Routine emails offered no comfort. Even the city's din felt offbeat, as though every car horn now told the approach of emptiness. They began to sense hollowness in every interaction. Strangers' vacant stares, friends' courteous smiles, even their own reflections' laughter held no warmth. Their thoughts churned with the vision of that person's absence, drowning all others in a sea of darkness. One morning, they confronted themselves in the mirror. Ashen complexion, sunken eyes not just from sleepless nights, but from a heart scarred by regret. They asked, "If that person ever returned, would I dare to grasp their hand again?" Fear of losing them a second time, of forever losing that once precious bond, constricted their chest like a vice. In the days that followed, regret spread like an oil spill across their mind. They trapped themselves in a relentless loop of self-reproach, desperately seeking a way to atone. Yet every time they dared show a shred of vulnerability, shame and fear swallowed them whole. Their apologies remained buried too deep to surface, while the if-onlys dug ever deeper fissures in their soul. They realized that it was hesitation, fear of facing love itself, that plunged them into the abyss of remorse. Then, in an almost transcendent moment, they understood. Belated regret is not only the agony of a missed past, but also the summons to grow. If they did not rise to banish these haunting what-ifs, the void would calcify, turning forever into a habit of avoidance. In the hush of their own heart, they glimpsed a flicker of light. Perhaps, even if late, daring to confront regret could pave the way for a fresh start, where they no longer feared embracing pain, no longer shied away from difficult conversations, and no longer let "if only" rule their hearts. That, they realized, was the first step to transforming late regret into the impetus for healing, learning to give themselves and others the chance to experience love fully once more. San, shame for pushing away the one who stayed. In the stillest moments when night falls and the city lights blur into distant fragments, the avoidant encounters a weight heavier than anything they've known. The shame of realizing they drove away the one person who always chose to stay. Shame here is more than mere disappointment. It's a slow-burning flame consuming their self-worth, forcing them to lower their gaze before the mirror. They recall every time they met a warm embrace with silence, every occasion they sidestepped a meaningful conversation instead of opening up. Every moment they greeted genuine care with icy detachment, believing these defenses were safer than vulnerability. Each memory now stands as a silent indictment. I was too callous. I was selfish enough to overlook someone's open heart. They busied themselves with commitments, clung to work deadlines, and immersed in social engagements. But all this activity was a flimsy mask. Beneath the surface, shame spread like ink in water. Every ordinary exchange reminded them of the final time they ignored that person's caring questions. They feigned nonchalance when asked, "Are you okay?" Even as their heart echoed, "If only they had asked one more time, I wouldn't have pushed them away." They flinched at every notification ping, hopeful it was their loved one, only to slump into fresh waves of remorse when it wasn't. Shame whispered relentlessly, each "if only" deepening the wound. There were moments they nearly wept beneath the fluorescent lights of their office, or the muted buzz of a quiet cafe, memories of a single, simple question going unanswered, of a patient voice they spurned. They pictured the moment the other's hand hovered, waiting to offer comfort, and themselves recoiling instead. Now they asked, "What did I offer in return for that kindness?" But the answer eluded them, buried under layers of guilt. Shame doesn't just wound, it breeds isolation. They recoiled into solitude to avoid the accusing eyes of their own reflection. Terrified to face their mistake, they remained stuck in a relentless cycle of self-reproach. Part of them longed to reach out with apologies, while another part froze at the fear of irrevocable rejection. Several times they began typing a heartfelt, "I'm sorry," only to delete every word, crushed by fear and humiliation. They remembered how patiently the other person had stayed, waiting, caring without conditions, never giving up. Those memories, once comforting, now served as a mirror reflecting their own failures. They had neither the courage to be honest nor the openness to reciprocate love. Watching that person quietly exit their life left a lingering sting of shame that felt impossible to erase. Yet within this darkness appears a glimmer of possibility. Shame's harsh spotlight can illuminate the path to growth. By embracing the truth of their mistake, they open the door to self-forgiveness. They might compose letters never sent, record shaky apologies, or make silent pledges to themselves, to listen rather than withdraw. Shame, unflinching, prompts them to recognize their capacity for sincerity if they dare confront their own self-doubt. And in the dawn's gentle glow after a long night, they make a vow. This shame will not become an eternal burden. They will summon the courage to step out from behind their walls and seek the one they hurt, not to demand or accuse, but to ask for a chance to learn to love genuinely. Though past errors leave scars, they will gather every ounce of bravery to utter those simple words, "I'm sorry for pushing you away." For only by acknowledging their faults can they begin to heal and offer love that is not steeped in regret, but enriched by forgiveness and hope for a new beginning. Fear of being unlovable. In the darkness of loss, yet another fear unexpectedly surfaces in the avoidant's mind. The fear that they are not worthy of love. After losing the one person who truly understood and valued their most delicate facets, they suddenly see themselves in the mirror, an individual so accustomed to hiding their loneliness that they now believe they hold no worth, not even enough to merit another chance. This fear germinates in sleepless nights, when all around is silent, prompting questions. Will anyone have the patience to step past my armor of silence? Will anyone dare confront the hidden corners of my soul? These questions seep beyond mere thought, piercing their flesh like cold needles, making their heart pulse faster at every recollection of unfulfilled promises. Survival instincts propel them to avoid this fear. They bury themselves in work deadlines, form shallow friendships, and cling to fleeting connections to fill the void. Yet the harder they grip, the more their hands feel empty. Each time someone places hope in them, they flinch. Am I good enough for them to stay? This crippling self-doubt leads them to hide behind masks of forced smiles, terrified of revealing their genuine yearning. When someone attempts to share a painful story or open up emotionally, they recoil, gripped by terror. If I share my pain, will they see how shattered I am and leave me like the rest? They turn away from potential empathy to preserve a fragment of self-respect, but in doing so, only deepen their solitude. Every invitation to closeness, an embrace, or a soft gaze becomes a terrifying trial, leaving them torn between longing for love and fear of abandonment. The belief of unworthiness becomes a lens through which they view every interaction. They misread others' looks and tones as warnings. If someone shows too much concern, they assume it will inevitably fade. They manufacture excuses for why others might leave. They must be mistaken about me. They don't really care. These justifications cushion the blow momentarily but ultimately reinforce the lie. Imagine waking each morning to a "you have a new message" notification, your heart lifting only to crash when you face yet another anonymous alert. The phone becomes a merciless reminder that even automated bots offer nothing to them. They yearn for a genuine hello, but scroll through countless empty contact lists. This fear of being unlovable also paralyzes them from forging new bonds. At every step, behind any potential chance of intimacy, they hide, "I don't need anyone," they tell themselves, a mantra to deny their own craving. In truth, that denial tightens the walls, pushing away anyone brave enough to try. Though someone may knock on their door, they always keep it ajar at best, a safe distance that only confirms their own beliefs. When they catch themselves longing yet afraid, they tighten their walls with another layer of silence. Yet in this maze of doubt and yearning, confronting the fear itself may be the turning point. By admitting, "I am terrified of being rejected," they create space for another's patience and kindness to prove otherwise. Trust grows when vulnerability is voiced. Amid the tug-of-war of suspicion and hope, they begin to realize, if someone remains, listens to their stuttering confessions, and accepts their fractures, that person is truly worthy. Imperfection is not a barrier, but an invitation to authentic love, love that embraces flaws instead of fleeing from them. By facing the fear of being unlovable, they unbolt the door to genuine connection, discovering that worthiness lies not in perfection, but in daring to be seen, faults and all. 5. Buried fury. At the end of it all, no one but themselves bears the whirlwind of fury hurled from their own heart. Amid the vast silence of loss, their anger finds no outlet, no target to unleash upon. Instead, it is buried, wave upon wave, as a lingering fire that refuses to die. Each morning they wake not to renewed hope, but to the echo of self-reproach. "It's all my fault." They find themselves asking without cease, "Why was I not brave enough to apologize? Why did I promise but not follow through? Why did I retreat and break their heart?" These questions carve open wounds long hardened by delayed regret. Many nights, they cling to their pillow in silent tears. But tears cannot wash away the rising fury, so entrenched is it beneath layers of stoic composure, daring every self-soothing attempt. Occasionally, they think a punch into the mattress might purge their rage, only to watch that momentary outburst turn into fresh guilt. "I'm despicable. I hurt them," with no proper release. That rage seeps into every thought and breath, constricting their chest like an invisible vice. By day, this fury taints even the smallest interaction. If a coworker asks for help, instead of a clear yes or no, they trap themselves in more work only to think, "I'll fail and embarrass myself," or they refuse to offer assistance, fearing unworthiness and chastising themselves. What good ever came from me? Every choice, no matter how trivial, is colored by smoldering anger and self-blame, feeding the fire within. In private dialogues, They wrestle between resentment and remorse. Why didn't I hold their hand longer? Why didn't I listen fully? Why did I hide instead of leaning in? Their fury, deprived of any external vent, burrows deeper, refusing to yield and pushing away any glimmer of healing with its scorched demands. When someone else shares their own heartbreak, they cannot direct their fury outward. Instead, it turns inward, a dagger to their own back. Every comforting word directed at them is met with recoil. I don't deserve kindness. I deserve to be punished. These assurances feel like barriers, forcing them to shrink into a cocoon of emotional ice. The cruelest truth is that the more they stifle their anger, the more lethal it becomes. It doesn't erupt outward. It burrows deeper into their subconscious, haunting nightmares of themselves, shoving their loved one away only to collapse in regret. They awaken one morning to a parched throat and aching body, as if their fury wrestled them through the night, tearing at every nerve. In desperation, they briefly contemplate one final escape, vanish without a trace like they have from past connections, leaving only an unsent apology behind. But buried fury denies such closure. It hurls memories of that final departure back in their face, insisting, that decision was yours, you're alone. And yet, within this blackened rage flickers a plea for self-rescue. If they dare turn that venom inward into compassion, if they muster the courage to face every harsh self-reproach, they might craft a genuine apology, a concrete promise to change. Fury need not be unleashed upon others. It can be transmuted into the willpower to repair. Then, as dawn breaks, should they dare peel away the mask of old indifference and offer their ex a long overdue embrace, whispering, I'm so sorry for the pain I caused, their buried fury may find its release. It will not vanish entirely, but its feral roar will subside, giving way to peace born of forgiveness and newfound self-respect. They will cease to be a prisoner of rage, and instead learn to harness it to awaken their best selves and carry forward a hope that, armed with courage, they will hold on to love rather than drive it away. Even as you have just followed 5 agonizing inner journeys from the void like a silent wound, through late regret, shame for pushing away the one who stayed, the fear of being unlovable, to buried fury, the story of the avoidant has an untold chapter ahead, the path out of darkness to rediscover the self. For no pain, in the end, fails to carry within it the seed of hope. Let us expand this story further, to explore how they, and perhaps you can transform seemingly irreparable wounds into stepping stones for change. First, looking back over those 5 profound emotions, we realize they are not enemies but stern teachers. The void shows them the value of presence. Regret sounds the alarm over missed chances. Shame exposes the invisible walls. Fear of unworthiness questions self-respect, and fury summons inner strength. Each is a powerful signal from the heart urging them to change, to awaken. Recognizing this, the avoidant begins to master an alchemy of emotions. They practice listening to their breath whenever emptiness surges. They turn to a journal, writing each, if only, in trembling but determined strokes, acknowledging fault and pain, yet also confirming their resolve not to remain trapped in the past. Every word laid down is a firmer step on the road to self-healing. Concurrently, they seek external methods of healing, sharing with a trusted friend or working with a therapist. They learn to tell their story without self-condemnation, trusting that every experience can become material for growth. Through those conversations, they listen to themselves and unearth the root causes of their defenses, perhaps childhood wounds, betrayals, or simply the fear of losing freedom. When the fear is named, its power to terrorize begins to wane. Next, they practice mindful presence. When buried fury surfaces, instead of suppressing it, they pause for a moment to feel it coursing through their veins. Hand on heart, they breathe in for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, until the fire subsides. They no longer avoid pain, they embrace it as an old companion, understanding that the past cannot be erased but can be transformed into strength for the present. Beyond personal practices, they turn loneliness into new connections. Family becomes the first anchor, a safe harbor to return to when their spirit is shattered. Close friends offer listening ears without demanding too much, simply holding space for them. Even pets can become cherished comrades. A gentle stroke across a dog's fur can soothe more than words ever could. Work and hobbies become fertile ground for rediscovering joy. Some take up painting to channel emotion into color. Others devote themselves to volunteer work, finding solace in giving care. Each day they choose a small act, brewing a perfect cup of tea, walking in the rain, or reading a chapter of an inspiring book so that life is no longer an empty routine but a tapestry of moments. On this journey, they come to see that self-love is not an empty slogan, but a daily practice. When confronted by the fear of unworthiness, they look into the mirror, meet their own eyes, and gently affirm, "I am worthy." Over time, those words echo beyond the glass, embedding themselves deep in the psyche, forging an unbreakable belief. A person, however wounded, deserves to be loved. Above all, they learn to forgive themselves. Forgiveness is not forgetting, but releasing the chains of inner resentment. They may write unsent letters to the one who left, pouring out every buried emotion, love, anger, remorse, then tear them up or burn them in a small ritual, symbolically severing ties to the past. That is the subtle magic, allowing history to rest so the present can rise. Finally, under the dawn light of a new day, they awaken with a calmer heart. The pain may still echo, but no longer overwhelms them. They stand taller, greeting life with a genuine smile when they think of the one who once understood, because those wounds taught them to love more deeply, with both independence and resilience. The avoidance story does not end in loss, but opens into a new chapter where they discover not only true love, but, first and foremost, the courage to open up, the patience to heal, and the self-respect to love fully. And so, after all the twists and turns of inner turmoil, the avoidant comes to realize that this journey does not end in tears or resentment, but instead opens a door to inner freedom. They understand that every wound, the silence of emptiness, the sting of belated regret, the shame of pushing someone away, the fear of being unlovable, and the fury buried deep within carries a valuable lesson. These are the stepping stones of growth, revealing that love is not a final destination, but an ongoing journey of self-discovery and reinvention. In moments of silence, they learn to listen to their own hidden truths, freed from the rush to avoid or shield themselves with numbing detachment. They rebuild trust both in their own worth and in their heart's capacity to open again. They renew a promise to themselves that the past will not dictate the future, that they will give themselves permission to be understood and to heal, and that they will bravely embrace even their most terrifying emotions. They also cast aside the belief, "I am not worthy of love." They come to see that value is not measured by perfection, but by authenticity, by the willingness to give and receive compassion. Instead of using silence to erect barriers, they adopt it as a foundation for healthy reflection, standing firm amid emotional storms, so that when they do speak, they speak with the pride of a heart that has been forged through trial. Even more importantly, they cultivate compassion toward others and toward themselves. When they stumble, they choose forgiveness over punishment. When they are hurt, they seek comfort rather than retreat. From the lessons of love unfulfilled, they learn to recognize warning signs and old patterns so that they never repeat the same mistakes. They grant themselves the right to be vulnerable, to err, and to begin again. Finally, when they step back into the world with an open heart, they no longer fear loneliness. They understand that solitude is not an enemy but a teacher, one that reveals the true value of genuine connection. And when they achieve that connection, whether with another person or with their own inner self, true love shines through. They need not chase after anyone to find solace. They have cultivated that comfort within their own hearts. Let the avoidance story become an uplifting melody. Do not fear love's painful side, for it teaches us how to love more fully. Do not flee from solitude, for it shows us how to find ourselves. And above all, do not lock your heart open to give and receive love, even when the past bears scars. Because in the end, the greatest courage is not in never falling, but in rising after every fall, stepping forward with a heart illuminated by the unwavering belief that you are worthy of genuine love.